Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes. Only this is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial as reported by Inner City Press. The courtroom wasn't prepared for this. Nobody was as Keanu Reeves took this, and the gallery leaned forward, bracing for something quiet, measured instead. What they got was one of the most unsettling testimonies of the entire trial. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry. He didn't accuse, he simply recounted calmly, eerily, what Sean Diddy Combs had once offered him during a private dinner in 2014, a role with no script, a contract with loyalty clauses, and one bizarre ritual-like condition: he would only be considered if he agreed to bathe in Diddy's used bathwater. At first, it sounded like a twisted joke, but what followed made it very clear it wasn't, and suddenly the courtroom understood just how deep Diddy's manipulation went. It began like any other Hollywood dinner, or at least that's what Keanu Reeves thought. In late 2014, while shooting a film in Los Angeles, he received an invitation through a private channel. It wasn't from a talent agent or studio executive, but from Sean Diddy Combs himself. The message was brief and cryptic: private dinner. No agents, just creatives come alone. The location, a gated mansion tucked high in the Malibu hills, known more for its seclusion than for being a celebrity hotspot. Reeves, always curious but cautious, agreed. When he arrived, everything felt off. There were no paparazzi, no valet, just a single security guard who checked his ID and took his phone. No devices allowed, the man said. Inside, it wasn't a house, it was a setup. Dozens of candles lined the floor and soft ambient music played over unseen speakers. Diddy stood in the center of a long dining table, smiling. "Keanu," he greeted, "glad you made it." The table was set for two neuther guests. No assistants, just Diddy and Keanu, surrounded by silence and shadows. Diddy poured them each a glass of wine and said, "Let's talk legacy." From that point on, Keanu would later testify, the night began to feel like a slow, surreal descent, less of a dinner and more of a recruitment ritual. They didn't talk about any specific film note at first. Diddy spoke in parables about power, secrecy, and the idea of earning entry into the higher rooms. He never mentioned a studio, never offered a script. He spoke instead about a role only a few can play, and hinted that this project, whatever it was, didn't follow the traditional rules of Hollywood. He described it as an immersive experience that redefined Keanu, growing visibly uncomfortable. During his court testimony, he said it was one of the most bizarre conversations he'd ever had. He kept repeating things like, "This isn't about acting, it's about transformation. It's about proving who you are when nobody's watching." At first, Keanu thought maybe it was some kind of psychological acting method, or maybe a new age film technique that blurred reality and fiction, but then Diddy leaned forward and said something that made Keanu stop cold. To begin, "You'll have to show loyalty. No agents, no press, just submission. That's the only way this works." Keanu explained that what followed wasn't a pitch. It was something closer to an indoctrination. Diddy slid a black folder across the candlelit table, but when Keanu opened it, there were no storyboards, no script, no cast list. Instead, it was a single printed document with 7 bullet points titled Loyalty Framework Agreement. There were no legal disclaimers, no studio logos, no WGA registration numbers, just vague directives written in an eerily ceremonial tone. Item 1, you must trust the process, even when blind. Item 2, you will speak of this project to no one. Item 3, you will enter the water of rebirth as others have before you. Item 4, you will not ask questions. Item 5, your reward will be legacy. If you seek cash, leave now. Items 6, cleansing is mandatory. Item 7, loyalty is forever. Keanu testified that he tried to clarify, is this a pitch for a movie or something else? Diddy just smiled and said, "You ask too many questions. Keanu, that's why I invited you, because you still have doubt. Doubt is loyalty's final test." At this point, Keanu says his instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. He'd worked in this industry for decades. He'd seen odd pitches, method directors, intense rehearsals, but never anything like this. Diddy told him the project didn't have a title because it didn't need one. The people who complete it, they don't care about credits. He said he described it as off-grid, a reawakening, and a trial of sacrifice that comes before their word. When Keanu pushed back, asking for more clarity, Diddy's tone shifted, his voice lowered. "You're thinking too small. You want a script. I'm offering you elevation." The court grew silent as Keanu explained the most disturbing moment yet. Diddy placed a small black stone on the table and said, "When you walk into the bathhouse, you'll carry this, and when you come out, you'll never be the same. That's when we'll begin." Keanu asked what he meant by bathhouse, and Diddy, smiling wider now, said, "It's the second part of the loyalty clause, that's when you get wet." Keanu's expression changed as he recalled what came next. According to his testimony, Diddy leaned in slowly, almost whispering, "We're all connected through water." He said, "Water holds memory, that's why it matters who you bathe with." While Keanu, visibly disturbed by the memory, even a decade later said, Diddy described a bizarre initiation rite that would mark true loyalty. It wasn't symbolic, it wasn't spiritual, it was specific and disgusting. "If you're serious," Diddy allegedly told him, "you'll come to the next meeting. You'll bring this stone and you'll step into the same bathwater I've stepped out of. That's when I'll know you're ready." Keanu blinked, thinking Diddy was making a twisted metaphor. But Diddy clarified, "It's not a joke, my assistants. We'll prepare the bath, you'll enter it. Once I've exited, you'll be cleansed in my residue, you'll come out new." The courtroom was stunned. A soft gasp spread through the gallery. Keanu said. He stared at Diddy for a long moment, trying to make sense of it. "I thought he was testing me or trying to humiliate me, but he was serious, Did. He never laughed, never broke character." He simply refilled Keanu's glass and asked, "Are you in?" At that point, Keanu said he stood up, he didn't respond, he thanked Diddy for dinner, and walked out without another word. He said he was still processing whether it was a prank or a social experiment. But Diddy called out after him, "You'll come back. They always come back. They just need time to understand what legacy costs." When Keanu got back to his car, his phone was waiting in a sealed black envelope. Inside there was a card with a phrase printed in gold lettering, "Loyalty is tested in water." He never responded and never went back, but from that night forward, Keanu's career took a subtle shift. Roles, dried up collaborations were canceled, and he says several producers he once worked with began distancing themselves. "I didn't know if it was connected," Keanu told the court, but it all began after the bath. Keanu Reeves testified that in the weeks following that disturbing dinner with Diddy, he tried to dismiss the experience as a one-off moment, a strange Hollywood encounter that would simply fade away, but it didn't. Instead, something shifted around him, not publicly, but subtly, quietly, like a shadow moving just out of sight. The first sign came 3 days later, when his home phone rang at 3:17 a.m. No name, no number, just static. When he answered, he heard nothing at first. Then a long breath, one slow, deliberate inhale, followed by silence. Then the line clicked dead. At first, he assumed it was a wrong number or prank, but it happened again and again. Over the next 2 weeks, Keanu received 5 more calls, all at odd hours, all from blocked numbers, every one of them. The same breathing, then silence. He also began to notice strange cars parked near his home for long periods, once while walking into his garage. He found a black envelope tucked beneath his windshield wiper. Inside was a message printed on a single strip of parchment-like paper. "Unfinished rituals have consequences." It was signed with a single letter. S, no return address, no watermark. Nothing to trace. In court, Keanu admitted he was shaken but didn't want to jump to conclusions. He said he contacted his longtime agent and friend, who told him bluntly, "If you didn't sign anything and you didn't speak, forget it ever happened." But the agent also added something chilling. There are people out there who don't like hearing, no, especially when they think you're one of them. Keanu tried to move on. He began preparing for a new role in a film backed by an independent studio. The budget was mid-range, the script was solid, and it was the kind of project that usually attracted investors easily. But just days before pre-production was set to begin, the studio pulled out. They cited unforeseen funding concerns. Then another role, a cameo in a major franchise sequel, was mysteriously scrapped. No explanation, no recasting, just erased. At first, Keanu chalked it up to bad timing, but then a respected director he'd worked with before reached out to him privately and said something that changed his entire view of what was happening. Keanu, the director, said, "I don't know what you walked away from, but whatever it was, it scared the right people." That was the moment, Keanu said, that he realized something much larger was happening behind the scenes. In the months that followed, Keanu Reeves' career took a slow and chilling turn. On the surface, nothing seemed wrong. There were no headlines, no scandals, no controversy, but behind closed doors, something was clearly shifting. Projects We're falling through meetings, we're being canceled. Collaborators who once called regularly stopped replying altogether. He described a particular night at a Hollywood benefit event, a black tie gala filled with A-list celebrities and media. As he stood by the bar, a famous actress walked past him, someone he'd worked with before, someone he'd always trusted. She paused for only a second, leaned in close enough to whisper, and said, "You said no, didn't you?" Then she smiled and walked away without waiting for an answer. At that moment, Keanu realized something. The offer he turned down wasn't just an isolated dinner, it was an entrance exam, and he had failed. It the testimonies that came later in the trial supported. This theory, other witnesses described Diddy dinners that'll to unexpected success stories, actors and musicians who went from unknowns to household names after aligning with him. But those who declined, those horse-sisted, were quietly pushed out. Keanu said, he began to notice an unspoken pattern. Certain artists exploded overnight, while others simply vanished. One actor who had starred in a string of action films in the early 2000s was rumored to have disappeared from the industry after an altercation with Diddy's team. He didn't play the game, people whispered, and he paid for it. Keanu said, the industry began to feel like a house of mirrors where the real decision-makers weren't producers or directors, but gatekeepers behind velvet curtains, pulling strings invisibly. Keanu revealed another chilling detail about 4 months after the dinner. He found his name mysteriously removed from a charity campaign he had helped organize. He received a curt email. The board has decided to move in a different direction, he later found out that the campaign had received a large anonymous donations shortly before he was removed, and the new campaign, Face an Actor Keanu knew, had ties to Diddy's circle. It wasn't just career setbacks, it was targeted exclusion. He described another incident, a meeting with a studio executive that ended abruptly after the exec took a phone call mid-pitch. When the call ended, the exec stood up and said, "You know, I'm sorry, we're going to have to reschedule." The tone was final. Keanu never got another call in court. He said, "It's not about being blacklisted, it's about being erased, not loudly, not publicly, but with quiet efficiency." One of the most jaw-dropping moments of Keanu Reeves' testimony came when he described what Diddy said during that dinner, specifically the names that were brought up, not as gossip, not as industry talk, but as subtle threats disguised as praise. Keanu told the court that midway through the meal, Diddy leaned back in his chair and began talking about actors and artists who had done what they needed to do. He didn't mention any specific contracts or roles. Instead, he spoke in code using phrases like baptized in legacy and those who proved their loyalty. But Keanu knew what he meant. Here counted Diddy saying things like, "You ever wonder why he blew up so fast? Loyalty. He stepped into the bath." She didn't ask questions, that's why she got the trilogy. You don't get billion-dollar roles by staying. Keanu said he initially laughed, thinking Diddy was being metaphorical, but Diddy was calm, serious. Dead-eyed the ones who did it, he said, "They know that's why they don't speak." Then he looked at Keanu and added, "And that's why they get everything, because they showed me their mind." In court, Keanu declined to reveal every name mentioned, but he confirmed that some of the biggest actors in the world were part of that conversation. He said Diddy was careful not to accuse. Instead, he suggested he made it clear that those who rose fast had done something most people couldn't stomach. Keanu admitted it was difficult to believe at the time, but in the years that followed, as he watched those same people dominate the industry while others vanished, it started to add up. "I didn't want to believe it," he said, "but every time I saw someone who was at thatable explode overnight, it became harder." To ignore one name in particular stood out. Keanu said, Diddy spoke about an actor who had just been cast in a major superhero franchise. "You know why he's in the suit?" Diddy had allegedly said, "Because he soaked for 2 minutes, 2 minutes, that's all it took." The courtroom was in disbelief. Some jury members shifted uncomfortably. The prosecution paused before asking the next question, knowing that the implications of what Keanu was saying weren't just disturbing, they were seismic. Keanu concluded testimony by saying, "If it had just been me, maybe I could have brushed it off. But I know now, I wasn't the only one who got the offer, was just one of the few who walked away." Keanu Reeves continued his testimony with a moment that seemed pulled straight from a psychological thriller. After the initial dinner in Malibu, and after weeks of unsettling calls and quiet career sabotage, he received a second invitation from Diddy. This time, there was no dinner, no formality. Just a message through a mutual contact: "If you want to understand the system, come see the Voltat first." Keanu didn't respond, but curiosity gnawed at him. Part of him still wondered if this was some elaborate performance art or an industry stunt gone too far. He agreed to meet, but only at a neutral location. Instead, he was taken to what appeared to be Appenth House Suite in Beverly Hills. Batons inside Keanu said it felt more like a surveillance hub than a home, now Indo's minimal furniture. Multiple screens embedded in the walls, a faint hum of running machines filled the room. That's when Diddy allegedly showed him what he called the insurance, according to Keanu. Diddy pointed toward a set of drawers all locked, all labeled with names. He didn't open them. He didn't need to. What he said next chilled Keanu to his core. Everybody's got leverage. I just keep mine organized. Then he turned to Keanu and said, if you'd stepped into the bath, you'd have your drawer too, but now you're a maybe. Keanu told the court. He understood immediately what Diddy meant. These weren't files. These were secrets footage contracts, possibly NDAS, and the people whose names were on those drawers, they were known, famous, trusted. He was then offered a final chance. You don't even have to speak, Diddy allegedly said. Just show up, we'll record the silence, that's enough. Keanu refused politely, firmly he left, but he remembered what Diddy whispered as the elevator doors closed. Silence is loyalty. Don't forget that the courtroom had heard shocking claims before, but what came next from Keanu Reeves was different. This wasn't just about exposure. It was about fear and the power of silence in an industry that thrives on secrecy. Keanu admitted to the court that he could have come forward years ago. There were moments, especially after hearing rumors about other victims, or watching artists mysteriously disappear from the public eye when he wanted to speak, but something always stopped him. Sometimes it was a subtle warning. Other times it was a friend pulling him aside and saying, "Don't be the guy who takes the fall for exposing the club." And sometimes it was just the fear that Noon would believe him what broke that silence. The trial, Keanu testified that when he saw Cassie Ventura cry on the stand, when he heard the recordings, the timeline and the description of ritual-like environments that matched what he had seen, something inside him shifted. He realized the stories were no longer isolated, they were connected. It wasn't just about me, Hanu said. It never was. It was a system, and it knew I had been part of it, not willingly. But I had seen too much to pretend. Otherwise, he spoke about a moment in 2020 when another actor he once worked with reached out to him after news of Diddy's first legal troubles surfaced. The message was simple. Now's your chance. If you speak, I'll back you up, Keanu. Sadi deleted the message not because he didn't believe, but because he was still afraid. It wasn't until the court subpoena arrived that Keanu saw it. Differently, he wasn't being punished. He was being offered a final opportunity to do the right thing. This wasn't about revenge, he told the judge. It was about clarity, about saying something before I leave this industry forever. By the time Keanu Reeves finished speaking, the courtroom was unlike anything it had been all week. Gone was the quiet confidence of Diddy's defense team. Gone was the smirking gallery of Hollywood insiders who had attended to show support in their place. Silence palpable, suffocating. Diddy's lawyers scrambled to object to parts of Keanu's testimony, claiming hearsay and irrelevance. But the judge, visibly affected by the testimony, overruled them again and again. The jury remained frozen, eyes locked on Reeves. One juror even wiped away a tear. Another scribbled furiously in a notebook. This wasn't just another celebrity testimonial, it was a quiet indictment of an entire culture. Keanu's final words, before stepping down, echoed through the room. He said, "The only reason I'm still here is because I said no, and the only reason I said no is because I still believed there was a line." He turned to face Diddy, who sat with his head lowered, jaw clenched, lips pressed tight. "You told me legacy had a price," Keanu added, "but I'd rather be forgotten than remembered for bathing in your water." That moment, raw, sharp, and symbolic, broke through the courtroom like thunder. After Keanu stepped down, a brief recess was called. Reporters stormed the hallway, typing furiously. Sketch artists scrambled to capture the expressions frozen across the defense team's faces. And for the first time, there was real fear in their posture, because Keanu didn't just testify, he confirmed every whisper.